Chapter 28. Carlos heard the thing howl and knew what it was. He'd only caught a glimpse of the monster on its way down, but it was big and badass, and he suspected that they were screwed. Jill raised her voice to a shout, and Carlos could only barely hear her over the Nemesis' seemingly endless scream. "Where's the 357? Carlos shook his head. He had the M16, but he'd stowed the heavy revolver and the rest of the rifle's magazines on the helicopter. "Grenade gun?" he shouted back, and it was Jill's turn to shake her head. "A 9mm and maybe 20 rounds left for the rifle. We'll have to blow open the door. It's our only chance." Carlos knew better even as he thought it. The front and back doors were heavy duty. They'd had better luck blowing a hole in the wall. And the answer hit him, and he saw that Jill already had it from the way she was staring at him, eyes wide and blinking. The Nemesis monster's howl was winding down, but a horrible, wet slurping noise had begun, the sound of something vast and sticky moving slowly and steadily across concrete. "It's coming for her. Can you operate it?" Carlos asked, already steeling himself for a confrontation with whatever the Nemesis had become. "Maybe, but..." Carlos cut her off. "I'm going to distract it. Get that thing running and let me know when to duck." Before Jill could protest, Carlos hurried past her, determined to do whatever he could to keep it from getting to her. "At least it's slower than it was. If I can just slow it down a little more." He reached the end of the wall of equipment, took a deep breath, stepped around the corner, and cried out in involuntary disgust at the oozing, undulating mass that crept and crawled toward him, pulling itself along with tall, shapeless appendages the color of blisters. Fleshy lumps rose and fell like bubbles in a pot of stew along its twisted back, thin, black fluid trickling from dozens of tiny slits on its body, wetting the floor, lubricating its meaty passage. Carlos picked a slightly raised lump on top of the giant, pulsing creature and opened fire, the rounds splashing into the fleshy surface like pebbles into a stream. And lightning fast, one of the tentacles at the front of the body lashed out, slapping Carlos's legs hard enough to knock him down. Carlos scrambled backwards through the pain in his side, awed by its incredible speed and not a little afraid. The bulk of it moved slowly, but its reflexes were insanely fast, and it had reached across 3 meters of open space to knock him down, seemingly without strain. "Puta madre," he breathed, the worst curse he could think of as he rolled to his feet and backed away. It was already to the corner of the metal wall, 10 meters or less from the cannon where Jill was wildly slapping at switches. He distracted it about as effectively as a fly distracted an airplane. "How much time do we have left before daybreak?" Suddenly, it howled again, a chorus of sound, each small, leaking slit on its body gaping open, 1,000 mouths screaming, creating a trumpeting, deafening roar. It wasn't going to stop. Carlos backed further away and opened fire again, a waste of bullets, but there was nothing else he could do. And then he heard the powerful, rising hum of a mighty turbine spinning fast and faster, and Jill was screaming for him to move. And Carlos moved. She hadn't been able to find the power main, no buttons or cords to connect, and she didn't know enough about machines to figure it out. She'd seen Carlos fall, and her heart had stopped, but she forced herself to keep trying, knowing it was all they had. After a second frantic, desperate search, she'd found the power switches on its base, and the machine had trummed to beautiful, wonderful life. "Move!" Joe shouted, pushing the levers that slowly and precisely raised the cannon, its movement spelled out digitally on a small screen next to the base. She could feel the energy building, the air around her heating up, and as Carlos got out of the way and the Nemesis entity slithered out into the open, she found herself positively thrilled, almost overcome with an intense and violent sense of self-satisfaction. It had killed Brad Vickers and tracked her mercilessly through the city. It had murdered the rescue team and stranded them in Raccoon. It had infected her with disease. It had terrorized her and wounded Carlos, and that it had been programmed to do these things didn't matter. She hated it with everything inside of her, despised it more than anything she'd ever despised. The mutated, aberrant thing inched forward on a wave of slime as the cannon's hum reached an explosive crescendo, the sound drowning out everything. Jill's words went unheard, even by her. "You want stars? I'll give you stars, you piece of shit," she said, and slammed her hand down on the activation switch. Chapter 29. A brilliant light, white but shaded with electricity searing orange and blue, burst from the end of the laser cannon in a beam of concentrated fury. Arcs of heat and light stormed over the body of the cannon like miniature bolts of lightning, and the laser found the once Nemesis's writhing, pulsating body and began to eat. The creature that had once been the pride of Umbrella's development section whined and thrashed, flailing its multiple limbs in a frenzy of agonized confusion. The tight beam of light bored into its flesh as relentless as it had proved, melting layers of tissue and soldering harder materials, bone and cartilage and pliable metal, into fused and useless lumps. The creature began to smolder, then smoke, and as the brainstem inside of it withered and cooked, the Nemesis ceased to exist, its program wiped, its improbable heart finally bursting silently deep inside. A few seconds later, the cannon overheated and shut itself down. Chapter 30. The helicopter lifted up and away, a little jerky at first, but Carlos quickly found his balance. The first streaks of real light were swelling into the eastern sky as the doomed city fell behind them. It seemed so strange to finally be on their way, after days of wanting it so badly, of working toward nothing else. "Nikolai's dead," Jill said, her voice cool and clear over the headset. It was the first thing she'd said since they'd taken off. "The Nemesis got him." "No great loss," Carlos replied, and meant it. They fell into silence again, Carlos content to just fly for the moment, give himself a chance to be still. He was dog-tired and wanted only to get as far away from Raccoon as possible before the missiles hit. After a moment, Jill reached across and placed her hand over his, and that was okay too. Jill held Carlos's hand as the sun inched slowly up over the horizon, turning the sky magnificent shades of pink and gray and lemon yellow. It was lovely, and Jill found that, as hard as she tried, she couldn't feel sorry that Raccoon was about to be dusted. It had been her home for a while, but it had become pain and death for thousands of people, and she thought that blasting it into hell and gone was probably the best thing that could happen to it. Neither of them spoke as the sun continued to rise, as the miles flew beneath them, forests and farms and empty roads appearing fresh and bright in the gently warming light. When the sky flashed white and the sound wave hit them a moment later, Jill didn't look back.